Hello and welcome to this episode, which presents the final section of the book Science Proclaims Materialism is Dead, from Substantialism to Non-Substantialism. As a reminder, this section summarizes the work done so far. First, an overview of contemporary physics, second, an overview of the interpretations that have been developed, and finally, a closer focus on the information process interpretation. Now we are ready to draw conclusions and thus provide a synthesis. The first point, of course, is to show that a quantum, for example, an electron or a quark, is not an elementary particle of matter. That is a very important point. The reality of matter is energy. When we ask ourselves, what is energy, we find that energy is not a substance. Energy refers to an entity's capacity to act and thus perform actions, an activity, and to produce a change. What is the nature of this activity referred to by energy? An activity is generally a configuration of actions, interactions, interdependencies, etc. The other very important point is the aspect of possibility potentiality. Quanta are characterized by their possibilities. With the second quantum revolution, quantum information and computing, we know that quanta and quantum systems are creation and processing quantum information dynamic systems. It is worth recalling that energy refers to the activity of an actor. When we take into account the notion of possibility, and the fact that quantum systems are systems capable of creating and processing information, we arrive at the conclusion that these actors are agents, especially when we consider all these elements within the framework of a non-substantialist ontology and metaphysics. In this case, the actor's existence is not grounded in its matter or substance because it is not composed of substance. Its existence is grounded in its specific and persistent activity, in its capacity to act, interact, and be in interaction. It is grounded in its capacity to process information, etc. Existence becomes an activity, a process with a goal, an immanent purpose, the purpose of existing. We are thus justified in moving from the notion of an actor or process to the notion of an agent. This reasoning constitutes the main motivation for moving from a substantialist ontology to a non-substantialist agential ontology. The final chapter presents agential and relational worldviews. It first introduces Alfred Whitehead's process-oriented and organic metaphysics and shows that it is, in fact, a non-substantialist, agential, and relational metaphysics. This is very important since this metaphysics has been adopted by several physicists and philosophers. There are, of course, other agential interpretations that have been proposed by other researchers. The author then briefly introduces his own agential and relational interpretation. We can therefore conclude, along with Hans-Peter Dürr, a former student, later assistant, and collaborator of Heisenberg, and former director of the Max Planck Institute for Physics, that matter is not made of matter. He also said, as a physicist, I have spent 50 years, that is, my entire research career, wondering what exactly lies beneath matter. The final conclusion is simple: matter does not exist. This is exactly what our book aims to demonstrate. Matter, as a substance, does not truly exist. We perceive the world as being composed of material substance, but when we examine this physical world more closely, we find that matter does not truly exist. Matter is an illusion that arises from our perception of the world. It points to a fundamental reality, activity. There is also Lars Jaeger, who said that physicists have had to bid farewell to the idea of solid atoms and any material substance, but at the same time a coherent and definitive theory of everything is not yet in sight. Various theories are proposed, and the debate continues. The philosophy of contemporary physics therefore rejects materialism substantialism and seeks an adequate alternative. The alternative proposed by the author is the non-substantialist, agential, and relational interpretation. Thanks to relativistic physics, we have discovered the equivalence of mass and energy. Thanks to relativistic and quantum physics, we have come to understand that energy does not denote a substance, but an activity, a complex of interrelated events or actions. While modern physics, 17th to 19th centuries, led to the slogan, "Everything is matter," and to materialism, contemporary philosophy of physics has led first and foremost to the slogan, "Everything is energy activity information," and thus to the rejection of materialism and substantialism and to the transition to non-substantialism. In conclusion, matter refers to energy, which does not denote a substance, but rather the capacity of an entity, or a dynamic system, to act, to perform an activity. An activity refers to a configuration of actions, interactions, and interdependencies between the entity and its environment, including other entities. In this context, it is more appropriate to consider the entity, here a quantum, as an actor. The latter is not composed of matter-substance, but of activity. Furthermore, the second quantum revolution, quantum information and computing, shows that quanta and quantum systems are information creation and processing dynamic systems. In other words, the constitutive activity of a quantum actor is an informational activity, involving the creation and processing of information. With this clarification regarding the nature of the activity, it is also important to clarify the nature of the actor. It is in fact an agent capable of acting on its own, of interacting, of becoming entangled and interdependent, and of determining itself. This synthesis thus leads us to propose a non-substantialist, agential interpretation of physics and the world. We can therefore declare the scientific and philosophical death of materialism and substantialism. We can also conclude that the current global system, which is based on materialism, is ultimately based on an illusion. Unfortunately, even though materialism is dead from a scientific and philosophical standpoint, it is still alive and remains dominant. It unfortunately controls our lives and our societies. It is leading us to major disasters. We must therefore react as quickly as possible, collectively, and on a global scale. That concludes my presentation of the book Science Proclaims Materialism is Dead, From Substantialism to Non-Substantialism. It is available on Amazon, on the IFF Books website, and on Goodreads website,